ITVT.
Hi, this is Tracy Swedlow, Editor-in-Chief of Interactive TV Today and the co-producer of the TV of Tomorrow show, which is coming up next December 4th in Manhattan at our new location. Check out itvt.com to subscribe to our newsletter. It's free for updates on everything we're doing and to get podcasts like this. This podcast features Randa Minkarah, who is the co-founder and COO of a company called Transform Inc., transform.co. She spent a little while with me to talk about her business, how it was founded, and what the artificial intelligence community is doing, and also what their company is doing to really attract the attention of the big broadcasters and studios to the potential benefits of using AI to make what they do a lot easier and more efficient.
That I am truly deeply passionate about not only the company but the people in the company, because without these amazing people working for us and with us, we would not have what we have today. And I'm passionate about media, and I'm passionate about making sure that media does the best it can do. And I know that there's so much pressure right now on traditional media as compared to the big streaming services. And I think that it is almost my duty, given my career and how long, my many years in media, to find a way to help media be its best and to make sure that all of those voices that we have, whether it's on the creative side or it's on the news side, have the best opportunity to impact as much audience as they can.
So, you've had a long career. I've tracked 15 years, I believe.
I'm not going to answer.
Okay. All right.
Many years. Yes.
And now as co-founder and COO of Transform Inc. at transform.co, that's your URL. You're doing, you're on top of the very dynamic topic of artificial intelligence, which is just, like I said, just super hot right now. Everybody wants to know how it works, how it's created, how it's deployed, how you make partnerships. How did you get into AI? Because you've been doing so many other things in the past.
That's a great question. When Fisher Communications, where I was before this, I was Senior Vice President of Revenue and Business Development. And I had this wonderful job where I actually did 5 different jobs. I was running all retrans. I was running all sales, revenue. I was running our digital directly. I was doing business development. I was buying programming and so on. And traffic and research and all of that reported up through me. It was a massive job. And we sold the company. The board made the decision to sell, and we sold the company. And I wanted to find a way to apply all that I knew. Furthermore, when I was at Fisher with this array of jobs, I called research and I said, I would like to approach buying programming and placing programming as well as promoting programming in a very different way. We've got a great deal of data here, and I would like to apply it. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I want to know where I really should place a show on the schedule in order to get the greatest possible rating. I want to know how and where and when to promote that show, also to generate the highest possible rating. I want to know what I should be paying for our show based on what revenue I'm generating across all of my markets. And he said, wow, that's really interesting. I said, yeah, if we do this, we're going to change the way the industry looks at all of this. Let's do it. He said, great. Called me back 30 days later and said, I've got it. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so amazing. I cannot wait. He says, I'm emailing it to you now. I get it. I open it. And it was exactly this, an Excel spreadsheet with 25 tabs. And I just said, Justin, what is this? And he said, this is what you asked for. And I said, no, I asked you for insight. You gave me data. More information is not something I need. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, your answer's in there somewhere. That's where the broadcast world and the media world generally has been. Lots of disparate data, much of it very, very important and relevant, but not brought together in a meaningful and harmonized way so that we can do massive analytics on top of it. So that was the genesis. And that's certainly not machine learning AI. Where that came in for us was over the period of 5 years as we began to look at creative and look at video in detail. And what I mean by detail is adding all of the tagging to video, the second by second, frame by frame in its entirety. This is where the build, came together and it became far more complex. We realized that applying AI machine learning to data is the only way to work with that much data. And it's the only way to really do it at scale and to do it quickly. So the first time we get a program, let's say we've got a show and it has 10 episodes and it's an hour long. And let's say we have another show and it's 10 episodes and it's 30 minutes long. When you run that through our platform, we come up with about over 800,000 data points. And the first time we run it through, it's a little bit slow. It takes a while for the machine to start to recognize characters and recognize places and objects and all that surrounds the intricacy of a show. And what we're looking for, and where we have to use very applied math, is in order to derive things that are hard to understand, for a machine to understand, things like mood and story threads and what is tracking through an episode and through a season. What we're looking for is what does the audience truly react to and with.
But how does all that stuff? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I'm curious how all that stuff gets tagged. Does it get hand tagged by some editors, like in an episode and recognizing faces, or does it automatically understand all of that? There's obviously face recognition, but there's so many companies who claim that they can bring awareness of how an episode performs, how it emotionally affects audiences, how it, whether it's successful or not, generating interest. So I'm kind of curious, like, how does one begin to start what's the right word? Architect out the episode so that the machine understands what it's looking at?
That's a great question. And believe me, that is something that our data scientists work on constantly. We're always refining it. But we have a huge corpus of data that we built this upon. And, if you think of something like Mechanical Turk, each one of these things is a hit. We started with looking at video hits. And then from that, we've developed algorithms on top of it with our taxonomy to refine this and continue to add detail to it. So it is not one simple thing, but it's a very large corpus of data. And unless you have that, unless you've got a huge amount of video that you've built your platform upon, it doesn't know enough to really be smart enough to give you the output you need. And that's what I was talking about on the panel when, there's a lot of companies out there that are that can run video through a machine and come back and tell you what objects are in it. Facial recognition, by the way, is a lot tougher than most people realize. And we've spent a lot of time, our data scientists have, working on facial recognition when it is, or character recognition when somebody has their back turned, it's a side view. What we've done is marry together not just the video elements themselves, but also the audio, which is very important to discern mood. All of the complexity has been built over time. And what I would say is, yes, there are a lot of companies that say they do this, but very often the output is something that is not meaningful. And what I mean by that is it's not tied to engagement, which is something else we look at and we tie together, as well as downloads and actual performance. You have to tie all three things together, or what you have is another piece of disparate data. And this is how, again, what I was talking about on the panel, you end up with a recommendation for boats or red cars, or, saying that this is really what engages the audience. It is not what engages the audience. So the complexity is in the algorithms that we have built as part of the platform that are the actual AI machine learning tools that have developed this complex way of looking at video. And I will go so far as to say we are the only company that I know of that has added all of these elements together in a platform that is producing this. So number one is the video. Number two is the massive and passive audience engagement measure that we look at. And we look at it by genre, we look at it by competitor, we look at it by talent and character, and we take a read, if you will, of what is the audience talking about, what elements in a show. They're not talking about a red car. They're talking about how a character is interacting with another character, the storylines, the themes, etc., the moods, how did they feel. We look at all of that and we tie that back to what is happening inside of the video itself. And then on top of that, we look at actual viewing and performance. How many downloads? How long did they spend with the content? Were they binging? Is this type of content bingeable? What are they saying? Are comments going up or down? Are they positive or negative? And from that, combining all three things, we are then able to evaluate the elements inside of a show or newscast, because we do a lot of news work. How are those resonating with an audience?
Well, speaking of newscasts, I'm trying to understand also what your customer base is, because one of the reasons we were so excited to have you at the show is because you are passionate about local news, and you do have a product called Local News Intelligence, but you're also doing something called Content Creator Intelligence and Content Distributor Intelligence. So it seems like you're very content oriented. I don't see, maybe I'm incorrect here, but I don't see any evidence that you're working for ad agencies and things like that, because I'm assuming they would love to have this kind of intelligence. Can you tell me a little bit about the balance of working for content companies versus ad companies, and who's more interested and willing to pay for these kinds of services today?
Well, our customer base is really studios, networks, and broadcasters. That and also some on the distributor side. So that would be phone companies, and that would be also cable, other distributors. We do not currently work with advertisers. I do see a value there. I do see, in particular, brands having an interest in what we're doing. We've had some conversations around that. In particular, with a very large company that happens to be on the content distributor side, who wants us to evaluate the ads themselves. That is something we are capable of doing, absolutely. It's in our wheelhouse, and we are talking about launching that as a product down the road. We would be doing it beta with them, but basically it's taking all of the ads, evaluating the content itself, and becoming predictive to help them understand which of their offers and which of their ads will perform better than another. So think of it as massive A/B testing and massive prediction of ad performance prior to that ad actually hitting the marketplace. And they see value in terms of reduction of creative costs, reduction of ad spend that is not necessarily attributable. So that's something out there. It's not something we've done yet. I am, as you said, very passionate about the news side of the business, and Local News Intelligence is created to allow those news directors and television stations, as well as the corporate groups, to look at what is truly moving an audience content-wise. So my vision about this, it came from, of course, my broadcast experience, where we had a general manager new to the market, new news director to the market, and there was a conversation about, well, I've done my research and I see that this market is very motivated by boats and by dogs, and that's what makes this market unique. And general manager comes back and says, absolutely not. We are only doing investigative. This is fluff. This is not news. And what I'd like to see is news directors have that flexibility to say, in my market, this is a news story. It doesn't have to be a fluff piece, but, it can be a piece about dog rescue or dog food or what have you, but it's of interest to the community. And if we can set news directors free to report on hard news, yes, absolutely, because we need that, but also tailoring that to different markets, because that's what resonates with your viewers. I think that's a great thing. It will, as a consequence, increase ratings for that station, and that's wonderful too. But at the end of the day, we're serving our community, and that's what we should be doing. And the data's there, the information's there. but it's disparate, and we can bring it all together. We can bring together your own media, your earned. We can bring together the actual performance through our partnership with ComScore on a 30-second by 30-second basis, which would even allow you to optimize your ad pods better. I mean, imagine if you knew that in my 11 o'clock news, if I have more than 6 cars in the first quarter hour, I lose. Let me put more on the backside. I keep more audience. That's a great thing to know, and something you can certainly set your traffic system to do. It's not something you need to do manually, but it makes your news better. It makes your audience happier, and it should make you more revenue. I think that's a win-win for news in general.
Well, I mean, as the news business becomes potentially more commodifiable, or more interactive, more on demand, distributed in so many different ways, can the management of news stories, because of how they do well, how they perform, is that something that you think will affect? Don't you think that will affect the news business itself to present news that is difficult to hear? I mean, how can what you're doing help the news editors build a stronger news offering, as well as serve their advertisers? It's a complicated, touchy question.
It is. And I think that they can better serve if they mathematically know that putting, this story in this segment will flow honestly better for their audience, right? Audiences are different in different markets. And I think that they'll be able to understand the different audiences between what is happening on the digital side versus what is happening on their linear side. And they'll be able to do that on a daily basis. And if you know that on a daily basis, you're bringing in all sorts of digital information as well, you'll know how to serve those stories digitally better as well. It's just
because they can micro serve audiences who are interested in specific types of news, perhaps. That's
exactly.
Probably. And how does your platform understand what is said? Because sometimes the script, which I'm assuming you're able to get or derive just by picking up, because I know you're listening to the show itself, but are you able to determine, the difference between irony and satire and comedy and drama, and not only that, but in the news and how things are communicated sometimes with sarcasm? It's how do you pick all that stuff up?
We have folks that are trained in NLP that have work on the modeling and work on the models. And I will say this, that nothing is 100% when you run it through a platform. Everything comes with our confidence scores, and we don't want to report on things unless we're quite confident that they are accurate, but there is nothing that's going to be 100% right. We have experts in NLP, as I said. We work very hard on our models to make sure that we are picking up satire and sarcasm. There's less of that in the news than there is on the show side, and that is why we will run a series through several times, especially the first time we run a series through, to begin to pick up how that story means and what those moods are and how that is reflected. But there's a lot of work being done in NLP just to make sure that we are picking up the right intention of the speaker. So we do listen to audio, we do look at the video, we also look at closed captioning. So between those three things, we are picking up the important part. We do look at how news is communicated. Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Is it, that sort of thing? We do read that. But we are not looking for a word for word when it comes to news in particular, and generally not necessarily looking for a word for word in other content, because it's the culmination of all of that information that is the leading indicator, not just one piece of it. So if I simply say, oh, that is important, but it isn't what moves the needle for an audience. And I don't want to lose sight of that the important elements are the combinations of mood with action, with the language that is being spoken. So it's the combination also is very strong. It helps us avoid mistakes. It helps us become more accurate and more clear because we're combining all three of those things. Very often, if you're only looking at one, you will miss quite a bit. So again, nothing's 100%, but we have our data scientists who are trained in this to make sure that we are picking up as much as possible of that sort of intonation.
I haven't asked you who your customers are. Are you able to say?
Generally we keep that very quiet. I hesitate to share that with you. There are broadcast groups that we work with, and there are content owners such as networks and studios. And realistically, that's about as far as we go. I will tell you that we do not combine data from different customers. We are not in the business of aggregating other customers' data in order to capitalize on that. They own all of the tagging. The tags are owned by our customer, and we do not aggregate from that in any way. It's important to us that everyone knows what they have is a completely separate system, and if you stop working with us, we just destroy it. So we're not in the business of aggregating data in order to sell it. We do look at social listening is public. Anybody can build their own system or listen to it or see it. So I don't mean what individuals are saying, because we don't look at individuals, but what we do look at is what is somebody saying about a show like Counterpoint, for instance. We just released an article about, Counterpart, that program, and whether what we see as a successful failure. So we have learnings that we have gleaned over time from working with different customers about what works and what doesn't. And that is our information, and we share that widely and freely with anyone who asks. But the individual information and data belongs to the customer, and we don't share it.
Are your customers able to run their own analysis, or are there set sort of templated call, data call? I don't even know how to phrase that, but can they say, "Hey, I'm curious about this data point, and it'll like show up in real time," or how does that work?
So it works. It is a subscription platform. So they are subscribing to the platform, and yes, they can run their own queries. It's very flexible in that we do not transform the data. We actually leave it in its raw form and only transform when we're specifically modeling for an insider outcome. So what we're doing is sitting down with our customers and saying, what is it you're trying to achieve? What is it you need to know about your content? What are you trying to learn here? And then that process can be automated for them. It's very, very quick, and we can turn it around in minutes. Now, we do not pull content off the air live that isn't ours. Newscasts are a little bit different, but what I mean is I don't go to Netflix and download a whole series and run it through the platform just to see how it's performing. We don't do that. We do we do want to work with the customers that own it and are actually giving us permission to add the tags to that video.
Is Netflix one of them? I know you're not going to tell me.
No, I will tell you
okay.
no. I can tell you no.
Okay. No, okay.
I can tell you yes. No, we do not work with Netflix at this time.
Okay. For the other clients that you have, the other customers, are any of them combining their broadcast programming offerings with any kind of online distribution of video clips, or perhaps services like CBS might have CBS All Access tied in with all of their CBS linear content and so on and so forth? Are they combining those two?
Yes, we combine cross-platform viewing for what we call total viewing, and that's a very important metric. We then also can parse it down to say this is the behavior of linear versus this is the behavior of an online customer or household. And generally speaking, we can derive a great deal of insight and information and customer segmentation from any of the digital output, simply because there's just an anonymized household identifier or device identifier that can be used to look at that individual household activity, if you will, and that allows us to predict quite a bit more on in terms of behavior. But we also look at DVR playback, and we look at linear numbers as well. All of that is performance, and there are differences, but there are very many similarities. When we look across the landscape, if a particular studio or network is dropping or releasing content in the same pattern for digital that they are for linear, then you're going to see a similar pattern. If they are actually delivering it all in one burst, then what we look at is how bingeable was this show? Is it bingeable? Were people snacking on it? When did they come into it? Did they go back? If they came in after the season started, did they go back and did they look at other shows, or did they just simply start on episode 3 and continue through? And then, did that household come back for the next season? Were they talking about how much chatter was out there about the show? What were they talking about? Was it the character? Was it a particular thread or storyline that is running through it? What are they talking about? And what we know is, if they're not talking about your show, and I said this on the stage, if they're not talking about your show, we know they're not watching it. There's a very, very strong correlation in the high 90s between how much talk and how many eyeballs you're going to get, how big your audience is. And we track it. We look at, from the moment a show is announced, how much talk is there. And then we look at it through the release, and we can then begin to predict, as we have several seasons, we can see whether or not the show has the qualities or qualifications or characteristics of something that's going to be successful. And that is something that we have learned over time. And why we're so confident in when we talk about content, it's because we've been working on this for 5 years. We've been refining our models. We've been applying our machine learning and AI over many years. And as the technology, and we've gotten better and faster, and our corpus of data has gotten larger and larger and larger, and we know that what we've trained our models on is really quite extensive, then we feel confident in the output that we are giving our customers. And I think we're starting to really resonate in the marketplace for that reason.
Are you pulling your own primary data from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or are you working with a third-party provider of that kind of content?
It depends. In some cases, we work with third-party providers, and they vary and can change as we find more and better and better and better. We work directly with customer data as well. That really is vital to what we do. So we have some data that we provide ourselves. We have third-party data that's licensed, and we have customer direct data. And so the customer direct data is really very important. It is unique to them, but it's also unique to how they use the platform.
And I'd love to understand better what an insight is, because all of these platforms are always providing me with lots of data. I see that, but what is an insight? What is a valuable insight? And what kind of? I'm also curious of what have you learned that really piqued your curiosity or taught you something new about how people view television?
Great question. An insight is more than 3 cliffhangers in a season will cost you audience. A insight is, I have to be careful not to actually give you the actual answer to a particular customer, but having too many characters with too many competing storylines in the same season will cost you audience permanently. If there is a departure in the way video is portrayed or the characters portrayed that is so different and isn't explained to the audience, you can lose audience and not regain it. Certain programs we know that what really motivates the audience is a certain character on the screen. We have been able to discern that in certain characters that are not lead characters, but they have a storyline that's interesting, can be more critical than others. And if you're thinking about what you want to write into the next season, the storylines that seem to be resonating really wonderfully and are being talked about, and the supporting cast that is resonating, that's something important to know as you're going into writing your next season. We've been able to discern how many locations are ineffective and ones that are actually really important to a story. If you're producing and you're looking at this and you're thinking, I've got 12 locations in this show, do I really need 12? Can we get by with 9? That's a big difference to the bottom line. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. So those are some, insights that we've been able to derive.
And do you get the sense that your customers are relying on these kinds of insights more and more? Or is it just beginning to pique their interest?
I would say it's just beginning to pique their interest. I think that what has happened with Netflix and Hulu and Amazon is they rely on data to make decisions. And I think rely on is the right word. You want to be informed, but the person, the executive or the producer or the writer, whomever, is still making the decision. I don't think that this is the be all end all, but I think that having that data and information there in real time is going to become very important. If you want to compete with those that have data in their DNA, then you've got to get data in yours. And that's what we're offering. We do the heavy lifting of the data wrangling and the harmonizing and the modeling, and send back to you something that is actionable, that is meaningful. If you want to know what country certain shows and themes and characters are resonating more than others, that's something we can tell you. So having that information just gives you more data to decide, but it's still up to that person to look at the other external factors and make those decisions.
Have you seen the insights that you have provided? Have you seen them be implemented and been reporting success because they had that insight? Have you seen an
That's
outcome?
A great question.
Okay, an outcome is normally the term for if something's sold, but I'm kind of curious if you saw a positive outcome here.
I think we're a bit too early. We've definitely seen them apply it. I didn't track to say what was the lift here or there, and that's a good question. I think that's something we should look at in the future, actually, is what I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, we're so busy working on the actual platform itself and the output from it to make sure it's actually insightful and actionable. I mean, it's one thing to have, what we don't want to do is just give them more data. We want to give them more information that's actionable. And that's a great question, and I will follow up on that.
Okay. Well, perhaps there always are challenges ahead. Can you name a couple, other than just getting more customers to sort of realize that this is a great, powerful tool? What are the software challenges ahead? What's the technology ahead that how would you like to improve these platforms?
Well, we continually work on improving the models. I think that there's no end to the data science. There's no end to the amount of video we're going to need to add the tagging to. It's I guess for me, the most important thing is having that ability to keep scaling, and that's keep hiring. Because as we add more and more customers, we need to add more and more team members. So for me, that's my biggest challenge out there. The work on improving algorithms and AI is always going to be taking place. And, if we were to say, oh, we're the ones doing this and this platform is as advanced as it can get, yes, it is today. But we have to remain that way in the future. And so to me, that's the greatest challenge that we have out there.
Are you funded?
We are VC funded, or really it's more on private funds, but it's yes. Yes. Short answer, yes. We are funded, and we are looking to get to the point where we don't need another round after this next one, and that we are fully capitalized and we are fully profitable by the end of next year.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add about what you'd like to do in the next couple of years?
What I would say, and I want to really go back and touch on something you said earlier, have you measured outcomes? No, we haven't, because we're so new to the marketplace. L&I has only just been in the marketplace recently. We announced it last year at NAB, and this year we rolled out our first beta. So this is at the beginning of that. And when we talk again in December, I'm sure that I'll have more outcomes for you. Good point that we will track that. I think that we are at the beginning, and this is something you touched on, that of customers understanding how much they need us and how quickly we can move. The challenge on the customer side is, do I buy or do I build? And I think that it is going to be very difficult for each individual group out there to build this, because it's our corpus of data, as I've already referenced. Our corpus that we built our models on is so big and deep, and we've had 5 years experience doing it. The world is moving so quickly that if you were to build, it would be difficult to do, and the technology would really eclipse what you're able to do individually. So that's a challenge for us as well. But I think that what we've done is synthesize this something so quick and complete that it's very easy for studios and broadcasters and distributors to have answers to the questions they need answered right away.
Yes, because those huge networks like Comcast and I'm sure AT&T, have the deep pockets, in Disney, to build this themselves. So will they or won't they? But
as studios and networks and content owners and creators and distributors recognize how much of a tool we can be to help them really move forward faster, because everybody wants to know how to optimize audience and where to place their marketing. And actually, we didn't really talk much about that, but we also have media mix modeling and attribution built into the platform, so you can see the efficacy of ad placement and how that's moving the needle as well. And that's another important element. And when you can bring all this stuff together, it really becomes profoundly useful. And that's the key. That's the exciting part. And that goes all the way back to what I said at the beginning about the genesis of this company. What are we trying to solve? We're trying to solve the fact that nobody in media needs any more data, because, dear God, we've got enough of it. But what we can't do is bring it all together in one place and start to make really smart decisions for our business, and to free our people from the drudgery of pulling together a report manually that takes a month when it can be done in a week or less, and it's automated. And now we're off to thinking about creativity and strategy and really the best parts of the business. I just want the best parts of the business left, and let's get the drudgery out.
It'd be interesting to see how the creators, how they would take this information and potentially say, oh, wow, people are really responding to this character and this storyline that was buried, and then be able to be influenced by that to generate, new shows out of that, or new offerings, or, maybe eventually when T-commerce becomes a real thing, be able to sell stuff to generate incremental revenue, perhaps. And again, we didn't really talk about attribution, but I think that's going to be an important data point that will be added in, unless you're already doing that. Did you say you were already working with attribution providers, data providers?
Well, we look at attribution in terms of where things are placed. It falls into attribution is realistically can be applied to a storyline as well. Is this storyline resonating, and if so, how so? And that is attribution as well. So we look at it from the point of marketing, and really specifically on the marketing side, we're looking at what is moving that audience needle. And the genesis of that for us really came from how this company was also started was because somebody wanted to know, they were spending about $7.5 million in marketing and wanted to know what creative was resonating and wanted to know what markets and where and what channels, et cetera. And we were able to show them across 42 different markets what was working. And then do more of this, do less of that. This will affect your actual cash register. And they said, that's great. Now make it predictive. And so we did. And we were about 96% accurate on a weekly basis in terms of outcome for them. And it allowed them to redeploy in markets and in mediums that were really pulling for them and take it out of places where it was ineffective. And that's great. I mean, that allowed the CMO to really start to think, okay, how do I move the needle in ways I haven't thought of? And I'm allowed now easier for me to experiment and maybe test. And that's just great. I love that kind of work.
Thank you very much, Randa Minkarah. And please visit your site, which is transform.co. And we also will have links to your appearance at TVOT SF 2019, a couple of audio clips that were very nicely put together by one of your employees named Shane, so that you can hear what she had to say in addition to this great interview. Thanks so much for participating.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tracy.
TVOT.